This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 283.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode. I love debates. We've had several debates on the podcast, maybe on the podcast, but on YouTube channel for sure, and potentially on the podcast. And the reason I like debates is I like to hear what other people are thinking. Now, this debate I moderated. I did not participate. I mean, as much as I could not participate. It's very difficult when you have an opinion, and you try not to show it, but sometimes you do. So I don't know. Hello, gentlemen. We just said hi, so hi again.
Hello.
Good morning again.
All right, so I got two guests today, Damian and the great John Kerr, who wrote the SE Bible. I know you don't like me saying that, but that's what I call it. So the SE Bible, Master in Technical Sales. Damian has the community for sales engineers, cybersecurity specific. Is that right, Damian?
That's correct.
All right. That was like a very bad and brief introduction. So I'm going to give you a second, John, starting with you to introduce yourself the way you see fit.
Sure. So hello, everyone. My name is John Kerr. I'm the author and managing director of Mastering Technical Sales / Up to Speed. And my mission for goodness knows how many decades now has been to improve the profession of pre-sales engineers all around the world. That's what my company does through books, videos, podcasts like this, speaking engagements, you name it. So I'm here for you folks.
All right. And hopefully people were you were recording this the day before Demo Fest. This is going to be published a couple weeks after. So hopefully people saw you live. I wish I could see you live. Damian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning, everyone. So I'm Damian Tomasino. I am a principal sales engineer. I've been an IC and a manager, but I enjoy the IC role more. And I also run a community for pre-sales as well for upskilling, as well as specific to the cybersecurity community. So similar to John, right? On a mission to enable and help those in pre-sales make a bigger impact than just being the technical expert, as we so often get boxed into.
And there's a free gift for anyone who can spell Damian's last name right now. It's easy to say, but hard to spell for some reason. I can never spell it right. All right. So we're here together today because, Damian, you put a post on LinkedIn, and John, you disagree with it. I'm not going to say where I stand. I'm just going to be here listening. But the statement was, or I'm summarizing, Damian, if you want to restate it after I'm done, go ahead. But basically that pricing should be available for people to see. Is that accurate, Damian?
Yes.
And John, you disagreed in certain situations. So Damian, go ahead. Damian, maybe you can start by elaborating a little bit more, because it's always nuanced, right? We always say statements on LinkedIn, and then when we discuss, we find we agree on a lot more. So this might be a very short podcast, or it could be a long one. So go ahead and state it the way, what were you thinking when you stated that?
Yeah, so just to add some context, I think if you look at most websites today in the B2B space, right, on the vendors, anybody selling services, you will not find pricing. And it is a pretty common tactic from a marketing perspective to have a pricing page that lists a couple of options, a couple of nuances, but not actually give you the price. And I think this is a huge miss that we've seen in the past as well as today, where data is just available to buyers everywhere, right? I can jump in a Slack community, I can go call a friend, I can reach out to analysts like Gartner or Forrester. I will find your pricing information, but why are you going to make it that much harder for me to find it if I have to set a budget, right? If I have to plan ahead for the future? The price should be on the website, but there are caveats to that, as you said.
Okay. And John, you disagree with that?
So I disagree with that mostly. So my answer to Damian, and I stated this on LinkedIn, is the classic sales engineering answer of it depends. So what I did disagree was that for most companies, it is not a marketing tactic. It's actually a business necessity, even for a small company like mine, which I'll explain at some point, I think, in the next 45 minutes. So, yes, there are some nuances there. I think it's also a little bit more black and white than was being painted on LinkedIn.
Do you want to explain it now, or about your business
Uh,
specifically, or just
I'm going to use that as an example later. I mean, I think if you
okay?
take it to its absurdity, to the logical conclusion, you can't just go on a website of a company, say a big company like an SAP or an Oracle, and say, hey, how much is one of those SAP things? Or I want to buy 2 Oracles. How much is that? Right? The answer is it depends. So sometimes it is a business necessity or requirement that you need to gather information from customers before you can give them even a outline benchmark price. So I think
Okay.
that's my position.
So what I'd
Yeah.
like to do, which is a little bit different. Well, I think, I don't know. Maybe I'm being thinking too highly of myself. Uh, I would like to see where you guys agree. So, John, you said it depends. Where should the pricing? What's an example of where pricing should be available online?
So, for example, if you are a relatively small company or a single product company, or everything that you do is an X as a service and there's not too many variables, then certainly some indication, some range of pricing should be made available. The question comes into play, what are those variables, and how complicated is your pricing? Do you have international pricing? Is there government pricing? Are there discounts baked in for certain clients? So pricing models, as anybody in product marketing will tell you, rapidly get out of hand, to the point where even 20 years ago, there were software products sold that would calculate pricing on the fly for you. And they never worked because people's pricing models were too complex even back then.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that is one area where we do agree. So if you're a Microsoft, you're an SAP, a Dell, right? Huge organizations, multiple portfolios, multiple, vertical specific products. It probably is impossible to put a price on the website. But I do agree with John that if you are a point solution, or even if you have a couple of solutions that everybody loves to say, we roll into one, you buy the platform these days, right?
Yeah.
And then it's just different pieces of it. It's not unreasonable to have a starting point there from a pricing perspective. And what I mean by that is you don't put just the price on the website, right? You don't just say, hey, you buy my platform, it's $100,000 a year. It's never that black and white. But being able to put something as a starting point to give people a budget, to give them some indication of, you're in the realm of possibility, or there's no way you can afford us, is what I think buyers today really need in order to have those conversations. And I'll give a concrete example of this, right? How many times have we gone into a sales meeting where we've done a demo, we've gone through some qualification process, and the customer says, this is pretty interesting. I really like this. Let's move to a POV or a POC. And we're like halfway through, everything's going really well. We've probably spent weeks on this. And then the customer turns around and says, all right, I need to start putting together some quotes, right? And the initial price is, I don't know, I'm making this up, $150,000. And all of a sudden the person pulls back and is like, whoa, that's like, I just can't afford that. It's way out of the realm of possibility. You could argue that's part of the qualification process, but I would counter argue that that's something that should be as clear up front on the website, even before someone engages in a sales conversation, because sales resources are expensive.
Yeah, and I would again agree mostly with Damian, except to the point where if you are halfway through a POV and you have not discussed pricing in any way with your client, that is incredibly poor sales discipline. And if that sales
Yes.
rep and SE combo were working for me, they wouldn't be working for me too much longer if that behavior persisted. Right? I mean, that's just horrible sales discipline. So certainly, if you're progressing anywhere, that's going to require a significant input of time, money, or people into a deal, pricing needs to be discussed. The website is not always the best place to place pricing. Can you put some indicative pricing there? Yes, you can. And I think what I took exception to is the people who were piling on in the comments saying it's the evil marketing people who don't want to provide pricing to make you talk to a business development rep. It's like, no, that's not the way it is. And I don't know, maybe some companies do that. That's not my expression, and I'm certainly prepared to give companies the benefit of the doubt and assume that their pricing is even way more complex than we have up to speed mastering technical sales.
So
Yeah, I will. Sorry, I was going to say, I will say that at least for cyber, right, where most of my life has been spent, that is actually the model, right? It's take a demo, talk to sales, and the whole intent is to get you in front of an SDR, to talk to an AE, to then go to an SE just for a discovery conversation or just to learn the pricing. And I think that part of the model really is broken.
why is that the model? If we were to look deeper, like why is, if it's better in general to have pricing out up front, why, let's assume marketing are like marketing people are ethical people, right? I'm willing to make that assumption. I haven't met unethical market. Oh, I'm sure they're out there, but I don't want to generalize, right? Assuming they're ethical, why is that the model? Or at least do you have an explanation for that or an idea?
It's because that's been the sales and marketing playbook since the dawn of time in cyber, and many companies have been really slow to adapt it, unfortunately. I mean, if you look at all the comments on LinkedIn, especially from this year, everyone is talking about how sales being down, or sales and opportunities being pushed out. The market's really unsure. You're seeing a lot of layoffs because a lot of companies grew too fast. And I think it's because they grew sales staff too fast, right? You've got a lot of BDRs, a lot of AEs, right? And not the business to sustain that. And if you think about it, those individuals, and again, I'm talking cyber specific, are really there to help qualify opportunities, to talk about budgets, to see if there is a fit. Well, buyers today usually know more than the people they're initially talking to, right? So I've seen a lot of companies start to say, well, we got to reduce the amount of sales staff that we've had because we're not having that level of interaction. And maybe one avenue to save, not just from a cost perspective, but even from a time and qualification perspective, is to have a starting point of the price on your website.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that certainly buyers do want more information before they fully engage with the sales force and they have access to it. Now, there is that famous stat out there that says, buyers are 61% of the way through the sales cycle before they engage with you. Now, good luck trying to find the original source for that stat. Right? I mean, you go out and Google it, you find a trail of documents, and it's referenced in Challenger Sale and everywhere else. I prefer a revised version of it, is that somebody within your prospect is 61% of the way through the sales cycle before they engage with you. There are other people who are 40%, 20%, or 0% to whom you need to provide information. And I think we've got so wrapped around the fact that this information availability that prospects have that we forget that not everybody is that far progressed through the sales cycle. So I actually think that's a very dodgy stat for people to start building models around. Certainly it's partly true because, as Damian says, AEs and BDRs have been getting whacked at a ferocious rate in the last 6 to 9 months. We have definitely a more suspect economy in 2023. So yeah, you need to provide more information to your client, make more of it available online. And I think most organizations have done that. Maybe pricing is the last barrier. I still believe, and maybe AI is going to help us out here, there's a degree of complexity in there and some business issues, which we'll get to in a bit, that preclude you from doing that most effectively.
So, Damian, it sounds like what you were saying was that SDRs don't have enough information to be actually useful. Did I understand that properly? And I'm
Well,
not.
I want to be, I want to be careful and
It's
respectful of the role.
like in the sense that SDRs, their job is mostly to set as many appointments as possible, right? And that's their business model, right?
Yes.
So
Yes. However, that could also be coming from an inbound motion too, right? There are many organizations where some, whether you call it an SDR or BDR, we can debate that for hours. Some do focus on the outbound, and that is how they're metriced and comped. But others, right, use that marketing engine, and they're solely responsible for inbound, and then you're qualifying them from an inbound perspective. So I think the challenge that I see with SDRs is most buyers, to John's point, aren't always 60% of the way in their buyer journey. But for those that are less educated, let's say I'm only 10%, right? I kind of sort of understand the problem, but I need someone who knows this problem, lives this problem, and can clearly articulate to me why I should prioritize this problem versus like the 50 other things on my priority list, an SDR is not the person to do that. That is not the role to fill that education spot. And I think that's the gap, right? If you've got someone who's 60% of the journey, they know the problem space, they know the solution or some of solutions, right? They've got a list of use cases, they've already got a budget set in mind. Like they're there, right? They want to talk to sales and like get the quotes, move it along, let's do a POC, right? An SDR can initially triage a lot of that, no problem. But when you're on the other side of the spectrum where you have very little education and very little understanding of what's going on, having a conversation, even with the AE, right, if they don't understand the problem area extremely well,
Yeah.
is not always the best resource.
All right. So, like what John was saying earlier, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, John, is that it depends, and there are certain situations we cannot have the pricing available. Is that accurate?
Correct.
And I think we all agree on that.
Yes.
I'm putting my cards on the table. I agree with that. So, okay, it's not possible to have the pricing online. Now we have the other problem is that SDRs or AEs are not technical enough or don't know the problem enough to discuss that. Would that be a better problem to focus on rather than focusing on having a pricing page online? Or is there anything else that I'm missing that we could look at?
I'd say you can certainly work on those in parallel. I mean, if we look at where the industry is going, I would not want to be a BDR, SDR, whatever in 4 or 5 years, because at that point, their bots are going to be buying from our bots. Okay? And their lead generation, lead questioning engine is going to be talking to our lead generation and answering bots too. So I think that that level of sales is going to just slowly get squashed out of existence by automation, AI, ML, whatever you want to call it. And more information is going to be made available through that mechanism. So I think it's something, again, except for some of the smaller companies and special cases where that may eventually fade away over the next 4 or 5 years. That's maybe a radical thought, but I truly do believe that at least at the low end, their bots will be buying from our bots. Happens now with toilet paper and stuff like that. Why can't it happen with antivirus software?
So, well, you mentioned we have like 4 or 5 years of SDRs being around. Good luck, SDRs. Yeah. John has spoken. So, best, I guess, reskill. In the next 4 or 5 years, what can we do in the meantime to improve that process so that we can qualify in or out early, and we don't have to worry about spending half of because it's happened where not all account managers know what they're doing, and some SEs are brand new and they've never been taught to qualify or unqualify a deal.
Yes.
How do we mitigate that early on?
Yeah, so I think John said something really important that I want to poke at, right? There are larger organizations where your pricing is super complex. It depends upon a lot of variables, right? And you usually need to have several conversations in order to get there, to some degree, do discovery and kind of scope it out. However, when you're that big of an organization, you also have data available to you and lots of it, right? So I think what I'm seeing a gap internally is, let's say you can't put the pricing on the website, just too much complexity, right? It shouldn't preclude you as an AE or an SE from being able to give a pricing range, right? It doesn't mean that's the final price. It doesn't mean it's the starting price. But if I'm selling something to a customer, and the customer's in the healthcare space, and they say, well, you're qualifying me. They're not dumb. They know what we're doing, right? And they're asking questions of us. But before we proceed with this conversation, as part of the qualification point, right, I need a price. I need to know, is this in this year's budget? Do I need to go get more budget for next year? And you don't need to definitively say, oh, it's $50,000. That's it. I don't know anything about you, but here's the price. But being able to say, okay, based on your company size, right, let's just say the number of users you have and the fact that you're in the healthcare space, we have the data to say your rough pricing is somewhere between $40,000 and $80,000 from similar types of customers. That is what you should budget for, either for this year or for next year.
And I am in full and violent agreement with that.
I'm
Hey.
going to push back on something.
So the step that's in there, though, Damian, is in order to provide that range, you need to have a conversation to communicate with somebody to get data.
Yes.
And whether that's done, face to face over Zoom as we are now, bot to bot, whatever, you need to gather information. I mean, think about it as being a sales engineer, right? There's not a sales engineer in the world that doesn't always want to get one more piece of information about the client so they can do a better job in configuring, designing the system. Even nowadays, in most companies, although nominally sales is responsible for pricing and bill of materials, it's the SE that's actually the technical conscience of sales that looks at it and makes sure that it's okay. So as SCs and natural behaviorists, we always want to get more information so we can give a more accurate price, which goes against the grain for let's provide a range. And so historically, when we at Mastering Technical Sales, and now that we've merged with Up to Speed, we are arguably, I hate to use this phrase right now, the leading provider of pre-sales training around the world, but we probably are at this point. 60% of our business is running workshops for sales engineers, either virtually or physically. So you think that would be easy pricing, right? Yeah, but it isn't. And let me throw it back to the two of you. What do you think are some of the complexities that I or Tom King, the MD, would have in terms of providing a price to a client for running a workshop or a series of workshops? So what are the complexities involved in that, do you think?
The people you're talking to. Pricing something for someone who's taken their first SE role versus an experienced IC versus a new manager versus a senior level global leader. Those are for wildly different audiences.
So let's assume it's for a workshop that we're going to run either on site or virtually with X number of people in it. Right? Sounds simple, but it's not. Because now, how many people are going to be in the workshop? Is it virtual? Is it physical? Are you an existing customer? What are we teaching? Which country is it going to be run in? Is it going to be a classic workshop with ever 16 people in it? Or are you looking for us to come on site and do a whole bunch of workshops at a sales kickoff in 5 different languages for 9 different sessions? So years ago, we experimented. So a typical workshop is in a range, and I'm making these numbers up. So, competitors listening, ignore this. It's anywhere from $7,500 to $12,000 a day. Right? So purchasing, which number does purchasing remember? Right, $7,500. They remember $7,500. What number does the person who wants to go with your competitor remember? Right, the $12,000. And so you've immediately kind of set that, and you've done some anchoring, and then you come in and it says, well, we actually want to do this. We're going to run it on site at the Marina Bay Sands in Singapore. We need to have sessions in Korean, in Japanese, in Mandarin, in Spanish, in German, and in English and American. Right, so it's multilingual. Different number of people in different one. Is that going to be, how much per workshop per day is that going to be? And the answer is, well, it depends, right? So much more complex pricing than Damian coming to me and saying, hey, John, now I've got 12 SEs. I want to put them in a workshop for 2 days. We're going to cover business value discovery and answering questions. Okay? So Damian, so that's going to cost you whatever, like $20,000, right? Give or take. So that one's easy. As soon as it's then, but we also wanted to do some customization. We want to include this. We want to record it. We want access to videos afterwards. And then, it just wobbles around all over the place. And at some point, Damon comes back to me and says, but John, you said it was $20,000, right? That's what I told purchasing. Help me out, man. It's not evil marketing is my point. It's business reality.
No. Yes. I mean, it's fair. But would you also concede, though, John, that, if I knew I was coming to you, right, I'm a more advanced buyer. I'm coming to you. I know that I want training. I know how many people the training is for. Is it reasonable to say that you and I could have a 30-minute conversation knowing full well that you're going to do discovery, you're going to ask me a ton of questions, and then provide pricing back? It's not going to take us 3 sessions. It's not going to take us a demo and an SDR and an AE and an SE 4 meetings later just to get pricing.
No, absolutely not. And there's multiple reasons for that. Is one, despite what I've been speaking about, the complexity of the business, it's not that complex. Secondly, the privilege that I and other people in my space have is that, Damian, we deal with people like you and Ramsey. It is sales engineers working with other sales engineers who understand the value of discovery, can get to the point and give the data. And so 30 minutes is more than sufficient for me to say, oh, Damian, you've explained everything you need for this sales kickoff. It's going to cost you about this, give or take 20%. We can fine tune it after that. And then everyone's happy, right? You got a budgetary number and boom, away we go.
I want to add a couple of things. I feel like, Damien, what you're stating, for me, I look at it as a low-hanging fruit, where a customer comes in and knows exactly what they want. You don't have to do much. You just have to basically give them a price and they will buy.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times customers come in and they don't even, they know they have a problem. They don't know exactly what it is. And it could be a small thing and it could be a huge thing. And it's part of my job right now as an SE to help diagnose, to ask the right questions. And I might not get enough answers. I mentioned that in a previous post,
Mm-hmm.
that every meeting is a discovery call, every meeting is a qualification call, every meeting is a demo, right? So even if we get to the demo, we might find out something new that the one person we haven't talked to yet, who's never been invited to any of the calls, jumps in and says and throws a wrench into everything we're doing. It's not fun. We don't want to get there, but it happens. So sometimes we do need, depends on the complexity of the sale. Like if you're selling a bunch of Cisco network, if you're selling a Cisco router, that's easy. Selling a Cisco network, now you're talking about something a little bit more difficult. So sometimes low hanging fruit, you can do it in 1 hour. Sometimes you need a relationship, 6 months of just talking to customers and getting information. That's one aspect. And the other aspect that I thought about, one of your previous posts, you mentioned that Bant is dead or something like that, right?
Oh yeah, Bant. I hate Bant.
So Bant, I think it's important. Maybe not go out and ask, what's your budget? Do you have the authority? What's your need? What's the timeline? But throughout the conversations, you need to kind of gather that information. And me asking or finding out what their budget is allows me to say, you know what? You can't even buy from me. Right? Or I can say like, hey, let me find ways that I can get you a better return so you can have a bigger budget, or what you're asking for and the budget you have do not mix. So we can provide something within your budget, but doesn't cover everything that you're asking for. Right? So that's why I think having that conversation early on could be helpful, so that it doesn't drag for 6 months. And sometimes ranges help, but they are risky, right? I've had this conversation. Oh, it could be like $5,000. It could be $3 million.
Yes. How long is a piece of string? Yeah.
Yeah, but you're touching on something important though, Ramsey. Right? You said Bant, right? Like Bant is important for you, right? Bant itself, I think, was built as a model to train salespeople on how to qualify something in or out, right? That was the whole intent behind Bant. I think what I was getting at with Bant being dead is just like a lot of people say cold calling is dead or outbounding is dead. It's not the tactic, it's doing the tactic or following the framework in the same way that we did 10 years ago that is dead, right? So if you think about the buyer experience, you request a demo, you get called by an SDR, they qualify you with a Bant literally by reading through a script, to then pass you to an AE who does a little more qualification, to then get you on a conversation with an SE. You're 3 meetings in, you still haven't seen the product, right? And you still don't know the price, but you had to give them your budget. That model is definitively dead, and I will risk a lot on that. Doing discovery though, once you're in it, like once you've made contact with the SE, having some sessions, identifying stakeholders, 1,000%, you have to do it for the complexity of most products. But I think getting to that point is what kills a lot of sales opportunities, because buyers don't want to sit through it.
Yeah, you're throwing friction into the sales process, and again, you and I are agreeing on this. So I still dispute it's a marketing tactic to do that. I think it's people still mired in sales 20 years ago, the way it was done then, and so much about sales and selling and sales engineering has changed over the last couple of decades, and that really hasn't. The whole, especially outbound calling, right? I think you're always going to have inbounding to some degree, but outbound calling, and you go to these call centers and they've got these big screen TVs and who's made the most calls today and who's set up the most appointments, and they're numbers. It's not quality, they're numbers. I hate walking through those things. I mean, especially pre-COVID, I walked through those things and I cringe. It's like, as a former IT exec, I've been on the receiving end of those calls, or only if they caught me late in my office at 6 o'clock at night, but I've been on the receiving end.
Yes. And again, LinkedIn, great source of information for similar experiences of other people. I saw one yesterday where an executive had an introduction, right, to a new product that was not even on his radar, not budgeted for the year. And he's like, I know all about the product. I need a price to know if I can fit it in my budget this year or next year. And he was just like hammered by phone calls and emails and needing to take a meeting with the SDR before he could talk to somebody technical. And it's like, I had a referral into your company. I don't need to talk to the SDR. I need a budget or a discovery call to get to a budget. And it's like organizations, and that's not a marketing thing, right? Organizations from a sales process perspective just cannot get rid of this friction.
And wouldn't it streamline the sales process if we could do that? It's strange. I mean, for all the time that we've been running mastering technical sales, one of our top 2 classes is something we call business value discovery. And it teaches sales engineers how not just to uncover the technical problems, but also the business problems and link the two. And in the old days, we used to have people sitting there and their arms crossed saying, oh, I don't need to do this. I'm a techie. I'm all about features. That's the job of the salesperson. And we used to say, well, no. There are times when you're going to be sitting down with a customer all by yourself. You need to do this. There's times when the salesperson is clueless, and you're going to have to do this. There's times when they're not going to want to share with the salesperson because you've got the relationship and you need to know how to do this. So it's a partnership, but it's always with the sales engineer and the account exec. It's never with the sales engineer and the BDR or the SDR. So again, I think in 5 years, that is not a position that I would want to have at a enterprise software, hardware, or services company. I mean, it would terrify me for my job future.
So I would even go out on a limb and say that you're gonna see a lot of startups, and I would love to see a startup pull this model off. I will work with anyone who wants advice on this. I think that you're gonna see some startups actually use marketing and pre-sales only. And the pre-sales person, kind of like you have these full stack developers now who can do front end and back end, the pre-sales person will essentially become a full cycle resource, right?
Yeah.
Because you're doing discovery. You're getting an initial qualification. You're doing discovery. You set the price.
Yeah.
Well,
why not?
So like I've been in sales for a while now. They switched me out of SE, and John has been doing, I guess, a lot longer than I have, since he has to sell his services as well. I find most SEs do not want to own the entire cycle.
Yeah.
We don't want to find the opportunities. Sure, it's the SDR's job, but also if the SDR is not getting enough opportunities, then it's down to the account manager to find opportunities to hit their quota, right? We don't want to find those. We also lose a bit of credibility because as soon as we talk about money, now you want money from me. I don't trust you as much. And then you have to, like, most SEs don't want to negotiate, I find, right? We can set the pricing, but then when the customer comes back and says, I need a bit of discount, it doesn't fit in my budget, and now the SE is like, that's not why I want to get into technology.
Yeah. So notice the key phrase there right at the start, Ramsey, was you said the account manager relies on the SDR to generate leads and opportunities. Could be 5%, could be 100%. I think that's the model that we need to investigate where things need to change. I mean, if you're an account exec and you're dealing with a major enterprise company, your one and only client is Chase Manhattan Bank or Telstra or somebody like that. Like it's your job to find this stuff, right?
Yep.
And partner with the sales engineer to do
Actually,
it.
the sales,
So
sales engineers
that
are better at it.
reliance. I mean, I'm with Damian, and the one and done with the educated customer is definitely the way to go. And everyone's looking for ways to speed up the sales cycle. And like, my goodness, wouldn't that take 10 days at least, if not more, out of the front end of the sales cycle?
So,
Yeah, but Ramsey, you said like, I think SEs don't want to do prospecting, right? That was your first comment.
well,
I don't want to do prospecting either. I think it's like I am not an outbounder. I am not a prospector. It literally makes me nauseous to
Yeah.
think about it, right? But I will say this: investing time in things like social media, writing, working with the marketing department, right? That's not necessarily
these are
prospecting,
fun
but
stuff that
it
we do.
generates conversations.
But that's fun, and
Yes.
a lot of SEs enjoy doing it, right?
It's fun,
But,
but it
but
also is a way to attract and build
Yeah.
credibility.
it will attract and build credibility, but you still need someone to call on them, right? And the SDR or the account manager. But something you guys both mentioned, like SEs have to learn to talk about business. I never hear
Mm-hmm.
about AEs needing to learn about technology and the problem solving either. Because I find if AEs learn, they don't have to solve everything, but if they know enough to have a conversation with a
Mm-hmm.
customer without having to set up another call with their SEs, maybe they can at that point give a range or give a budget for next year. Does it make
Yes.
sense?
There are companies that do that and AEs that do that. I mean, in my software career, I've worked with AEs who would not need an SE for the first call because they were technically competent enough to get through that first
Yes.
call. In other parts of the industry, if you're dealing with people with a mechanical engineering or a chemical engineering background and they're going out and selling heat pumps and polymers and chemicals, quite often they are these hybrids where they are both a salesperson and an engineer, and they do almost everything
Mhm.
except for legal contracts and negotiation. Because you're right, no techie wants to deal with that stuff. So certainly that model is in place in some of the harder engineering companies.
So if all right, let's say we talked about pricing on the webpage. That's not possible on all cases, to Damien's chagrin. If you want to, what's the best way to get the customer a budget as fast as possible in your mind? John, I'll start with you, and Damien, if you have any thoughts, you can.
Uh, so the customer has to express interest in your product or service, and then you set up a conversation with them as fast as you possibly can. And in my business, again, as Damien said, like Damien and I could have a conversation. He's going to know roughly what he wants in 30 minutes. I can guide him, or almost anybody else in my company can guide him, and then he'll have an outline budget proposal, and we'll have an action plan to go forwards. Um, no need to talk to people who really don't know too much about the product. I think if you have to talk to anybody in a tech company who's going to interact with you through a script, right, that's usually a bad call, at least for the customer. It might be a good call for
Yes.
the vendor. It's a bad call for the customer if someone's utilizing a script. I think
To
that's
push
the
back
tipping point.
on to push back a little bit. I mean, you've been running that business for a while, and you know it inside out. You know the workshops. You know everything about it. A lot of AEs join a company new. Like I worked with a AE who joined my company, which is a networking company. He has a background in components,
Mm-hmm.
like he did transceivers, right? So he couldn't hold a conversation on his own, no matter what. Like he needed me to talk internally. He needed me to talk. Right, go ahead.
So here's the rebuttal, right? What is that new sales reps manager doing? Right. That is the
Oh,
job.
he's working.
That is the job of the sales manager to train the salesperson how to do that. It's not the job of the sales engineer, right? And that's
But
another
the
thing we
salesman,
need to break that's been going on for 20
I
years.
I trained the sales manager at the time.
Yeah,
I trained the director.
So you're abdicating responsibility for sales management by allowing that to go on. And as engineers, we enable bad behavior, right? Because we like to make everybody happy. But that is clearly the job of sales management, to take care of pricing and bill of materials and everything else. Maybe the SE kind of blesses it, but
Well, all right. So it is the job of the sales
yeah.
manager. The sales manager sucks. I have no idea why they got hired, who hired them. I have no idea why they hired their new salesperson. As an SE, I have like what would be my options at that point? Either I do the training or I don't hit quota, or I do the training and not hit
So,
quota, which is what
so
happened.
that is it, right? We are the organization of last resort. If nobody
Yeah.
else in the company, right? Damian's nodding his head. If nobody else in the
Yep.
company will take action to do something that's going to help the client, the sales engineering team will, because it's in our behavioral nature to do so. However, that would not stop me, and I did this as an individual contributor when I first became an SE, of then going to speak to that sales manager's boss and say, like, what the hell? You know, this is an organizational
We've
issue you
had
have.
many
You need to fix this. Right? And I've never been shy about saying
So,
that.
yeah.
and I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum, right? I live most of my career in life in startup world, right? There is no enablement. You get hired, you better damn well be able to go figure it out. There is no manager. There's no enablement. You don't, I mean, you want my time, I'll give it to you, but with some caveats, but you need to figure it out. And like, for me, I've worked in several places where, yeah, I don't actually negotiate the MSA or the actual contract, right? We use a procurement or legal department for it, but actual pricing negotiations, I've done them plenty of times. And it's not because I don't want the AE to do it or that they're relying on me to do it. It's because, like, as part of the discovery process and doing the POC and showing that value, kind of what John said earlier, right? Yes, I've got my technical use cases. I've got, here's how you operationalize the thing. But I also know, hey, this purchase is tied to these compliance requirements. You get fined for one of these things, it's millions of dollars. So let's talk about how we close the gap at a reasonable cost for you and for us. That's not a hard conversation to have, but I will say not everyone is comfortable having it from a pre-sales
It
perspective.
is a hard conversation for many sales engineers to have because it's not in our nature. I mean, I remember 10 years ago going to a sales kickoff meeting at one of my clients, and there was a class being given about negotiation. Right? And it was an open session for everybody. And so I thought, oh, this is interesting. I'll kind of walk in the back. I was free for the afternoon. And there was 100 people in the room taking this negotiation class. There were 98 salespeople and 2 sales engineers. Because sales engineers said, we don't need to learn to negotiate. So fast forward about 2 years ago, and yeah, Ramsey, I'm kind of log rolling a bit here. No, we built a negotiation for sales engineers class. And the pushback we got is, I'm a sales engineer. I don't need to learn how to negotiate. I said, well, yes, you do. We're not talking about pricing. We're not talking about terms. As an SE, you negotiate every day with your sales partner, with your boss, with clients, with partners, with support, with product marketing. Right? You need to do a better job. You need to learn how to say no. And
Yes.
so suddenly it's one of our most successful classes ever. But you have to approach it that way. As soon as you tippy toe into the area of negotiating pricing and terms and conditions and legal, then 95% of SEs, and Damian's an exception here, but you're right. Smaller companies will do this. Like they just throw a wobbler. Like, I don't want to do it. No, and they run.
What I try to tell a lot of SEs is every time they open their mouths, they're either adding value or removing value, which helps in the negotiation, right? Which is what Damian was saying. Like, hey, if you don't do this, you're going to lose money. That's basically pointing out that, well, that's our value. We're going to save you money, right? But yeah, like that's an excellent course to have, and I'm glad someone is doing it finally.
Yes. Yep. Look at it also from this perspective too, right? You had mentioned earlier about the whole prospecting thing, right? And I even said, like, I'm not a prospector. Like, it makes me nauseous to think about it. If I have the ability to negotiate pricing specifically in a contract, because it is something I'm comfortable with, what if I saved my AE 8 hours of negotiations from a pricing perspective that they could turn around and reinvest in prospecting?
You should.
Right? Yeah. Exactly.
I think.
Exactly. Yeah. I completely agree. I think the whole point around this is, oh God.
unless that 8 hours, Damian, could be spent doing something far more productive on a deal that's got a high likelihood of closing, right? So it's it's ROAS, right? Return on pre-sales effort, we call it.
Well, if I understand correctly, I don't think Damian was saying that he's spending 8 hours. I think he's spending less hours, which saves the salesperson 8 hours.
Yeah. Oh, in which case, that's a great trade-off. If Damian can do it in 1 hour and the rep can do it in 8 hours, Damian should do it and have the rep watch him so the next time the rep can do it, right? If you just constantly do it to save the rep the 8 hours and the rep never learns, that's back to my whole premise of enabling bad behavior, I made 10 minutes ago.
Well, I think like negotiation is taking place throughout the conversations with the customers. For example, I was sitting with a customer.
Mm-hmm.
We had someone talking. We had a specialist talking on through Zoom. I'm sitting there, and I can see where the customer is leaning forward. It's like, all right, that's a negotiation point for my salesperson,
Mhm.
which is me in this case, right? Or they don't care. It's like, all right, I'm not going to mention that while I'm talking to them about pricing, right? So SEs can do that as well. Like when we're talking to a customer, they're going to say, oh man, I forgot that this fixes that thing for me. It's like, all right, here's a note for my salesperson. And that saves time. Like we're building ammunition, we're building a business case
Yeah.
for the customer based
Yes.
on everybody. And it doesn't take 2 hours. It just takes observation on a daily basis. Right?
Yes. Yep. I was going to say, I think one of the big things that I've heard throughout this conversation that we've been having is I think in the near future, kind of like the role of the SDR is changing, I think the role of pre-sales will ultimately be split. I think there's going to be sales engineers who truly stay in that technical realm, right? Like, we don't do prospecting. I'm not a contract person. I don't want to do negotiations. Like, you stay in the realm of technical sales per se. But I do think that there is a big shift of some people, and maybe pre-sales is not the right label for it. Maybe it needs a new name, but there is a shift of those who want to do more, right? Outreach, who want to do more publishing on social media, who want to do more building of an audience and still have that technical background and still be able to have that conversation. And in that regard, marketing is your best friend, right? How many marketing teams do you know who would love it if a SME turned around and said, hey, I want to write for the blog. I want to help do webcasts. Like, they would love that. And I don't think we have enough people who, with a technical background, who want to have that role, that partnership.
I would fully encourage any SME to get involved in that, and managers and anybody. I think that absolutely showcases the value that we have as a sales engineer. So
And
no
for
argument
those
there.
for
Yeah.
those who don't know what SME
So
is,
subject matter expert. Sorry, I used a TLA. I apologize.
what's it?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're gonna go down a
But I
rabbit
mean,
hole.
it has value, and like, if you want proof of it, I would say about 40 to 50% of all prospect conversations I have started off with, hey, I know who you are, you don't need to do an intro because I've read your LinkedIn content.
Yes.
Done.
Um,
Like, I've already got the established credibility because they know who I am from that regard. Doesn't mean I'm going to make the sale, right? But it at least puts me in a leg up of
yeah.
establishing trust with them.
And I think that goes to what we've become as sales engineers over the last couple of decades. Don Carmichael, another famous voice in this space, says that our
Mm-hmm.
unofficial title is, and I quote, the person the customer really wants to speak with. Uh, and
Yeah,
and
I
if
saw
that
that.
would fit on a business card, if people still have business cards, how great would that be? Because that's what we are. So, Damien, that's exactly what you've done, and it's again one of the things that has enabled my company to grow from its very humble roots. Is we've generated a brand. A lot of people know, not just me, but many of the other facilitators and people in the company. So we usually don't have to explain who we are and what we do. Every now and again we do, and that's okay. But people are coming to us more because they know what we do. They just want to get some more information about exactly how we do it, where we do it, and everything else. And you're finding the same thing. So
Mm-hmm.
again, we don't have SDRs. We don't really have too much lead generation program either. It just kind of comes to us. So I think we're all heading in the same direction here.
It's nice when the product sells itself.
Well, oh, I wish.
Yeah, I
I've
mean, I
only
think it's
once
more about
ever been in the situation where the product sold itself, and that is a
Well,
wonderful thing. But
yeah,
doesn't happen.
yeah. I think we can talk. We can go down another rabbit hole. Most SEs or most people I talk to who want to break into the SE role, they're looking for that unicorn product that sells itself. They want the product that they're in love with.
Yes.
They forget that most products have issues, and you still have to sell it. It still solves the problem for the customer, but as an SE, you're more harsh on your product than the customer is.
Oh,
So yeah,
definitely. We
um,
know all the dirty laundry, right? All the bad things
yeah.
behind the scenes that the customers don't necessarily know. Yeah.
All right, guys. I think this has been a great conversation. I want to leave a couple minutes for you guys to maybe share where people can connect with you or any final thoughts that you may have. So, Damien, you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. I live on LinkedIn, so anybody looking to connect, just reach out, say hi. You'll always find me there. I'm posting daily, always engaging with DMs, so love to make some new connections.
And for those who can't spell your last name, they get a bear hug from me. That's the reward I promised them. John,
Yeah,
where can people connect with you? And
I
any
think
last
Damian should change his last name to Mississippi because it might be easier to spell.
Yeah, there you go.
Or Tennessee. So you can find me on LinkedIn as well. I don't live there as much as Damian does, but I do post there regularly. I have a book of the month posting that I
I
do
saw
there
that.
that tends to
Yeah,
be
I saw
pretty
that.
popular and
I like your teacher.
generates a bit of controversy now and then. There is the website masteringtechnicalsales.com, and then we have books. So we have the Bible, as Ramsey calls it. I prefer to call it the handbook, the SE's handbook, and then we have the Trusted Advisor Sales Engineer and the SE Manager's Handbook, all available on Amazon and everywhere else where you commonly buy books. So again, feel free to reach out, ping me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to do that. Shoot me an email. Follow me on Twitter/X and any other platform you care to choose.
Nice. Well, thank you guys. It was a pleasure disagreeing with you, and I look forward for our next disagreement.
Sounds great.
Thank you,
And
sir.
Ramsey, thank you again so much for doing this. 10 years ago, people like you and actually Damian setting up everything didn't exist. So it's great. There's now all this support, and people like Peter Cohan and myself are no longer lone voices in the desert. So thanks so much.
Thank you guys. And that's the end of the show. So as I was saying in the intro, the direction of the conversation took a different turn, right? In the sense that Damian was saying that pricing is needed, and it's good to have it transparent and available on the website so people can make budgetary decisions for next year or whatever. And John did not disagree with that, but added the nuance that it is complicated. If you have one product that does one thing and there is no customization, then by all means put the price, but there are reasons why we don't. So, do you disagree or agree? What are your thoughts around this topic? I'd love to know, and I'd love to learn from you. So, I hope you enjoyed this show. Thank you, John, and thank you, Damian, for being on, and I look forward to the next conversation. With that, I'm signing off.